Good afternoon, everybody. So we spent a lot of time over lunch. Didn't realize that this was the main lecture, but that was an informal discussion. So I'll go straight into it. So my name, you all know, I look after Ecobank, Ghana, and the Anglophone West Africa. I'm a Christian. I'm married. I have two sons, both in uni. One in final year, the other in the second year of his master's. What else should I say? So, yes, I've been working now for about 30 years in banking. I've also been on many boards. I used to chair the stock exchange. I used to chair the College of Health Sciences. I was on the Airtel Tigo board, on the UK and Ghana Chamber of Commerce board, etc., etc. But I'm here today because leadership is something that is important to me. Leadership is important to all of us. That's why we're here. Earlier, I'd planned or I'd been asked to talk about leadership's role in strategy, development, and execution. And then the second part was the critical importance of ethics and sustainability in our AI era. I'll focus predominantly on the first, lightly touch on the second, and then we can have the Q&A. So in 2022, for those who recall, that was when Ghana was going through the macroeconomic challenges. At the time, I was looking after a bank, and I remember it was the eve of the colleague, or what you call like the staff party, Christmas party. We get a call that the Minister of Finance wants to see the bank CEOs. Typically when you've worked for so long in a bank and you can really take your time, the Christmas party is something people will really look forward to. I remember my dress. It was a red sparkly dress, and I'd planned that we're going to dance. Only to go for the meeting, and a long story short, the minister explained to us that all the government bonds that we're holding were going to be exchanged for longer tenor, shorter yielding bonds. In simple terms, they were taking what we had and giving us things that would give us less value today. If you work in a bank, it's a big deal. I think the shock, of it. I mean, we all went through the meeting. Some of my colleagues, literally even opened their mouths as he gave us the message. It wasn't what we expected. We all knew there were lots of challenges at the time, but that wasn't what we thought the end game would be. But that's what it was. But remember, I was still going to a Christmas party, and the leader has to show up and not spoil the party for everybody else. When we finished the meeting, I sat in the car for a short while, still got home, changed, got there, danced for an hour or two, sat in the car, got home and faced my reality. That's what leaders do. Most of the time we don't carry everything on our sleeves. So when you don't see everything the person is dealing with, it doesn't mean there isn't a lot they have to handle. So at this time, we go back to the office. I spare my team, even my leadership team and the board and the group, the pain, and decide to let them all have a good weekend. Because I think it was a Friday. And then I'll tell them on the Monday, at least they would be, not prepared, but at least we'll get there. So on the Monday, I tell the various stakeholders, and especially my leadership team. And you could see that they all needed me to give clarity around, so what next? Remember, I haven't been through this before. So it's not as if I know what next. I also don't. But as a leader, there's always the need for clarity, even when you also don't know the answers. I realized that they were looking for me to come to the party and say, so this is what we are going to do. I had to create a sense of belief that in spite of this is where we're going to go to. And if you know anybody who works in the banking industry, how you end the year matters because that's what determines your bonus. If you don't like money talk, I'm a banker, so you have to accommodate me. The reality is that's what happened. Now, the shareholders are upset because they're expecting their dividends. The colleagues are concerned because it means what happens to their bonus. And others are even concerned. What does it mean? Will we still have jobs? But then you've got to figure that out and not just give direction, but to what I said earlier, clarity. So when we talk about strategy, it's not just about the frameworks. And by the way, my master's was also in strategy and business development and finance. So I get that. But in the real world, it's more than the frameworks. In the real world, they help, but they don't solve the issue. Those are tools, actually. If you're to be candid in the place of work, they are tools. They are not necessarily strategy in itself. So whether it's Blue Ocean, Five Forces, there are many. They are helpful. They are very helpful, but the real work in strategy is not intellectual. It's actually about humans. It's human. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's even political. So in the short story I shared as an opening, I remember at the time, the group CFO, when I told them that this was going to happen, his first response was, we're going to close the bank. And I said, you are? Like, you're not supposed to close a bank because there's a problem, if you know what I mean. But it was just his reaction or response to the enormity of the problem. Because at that bank where our CEO, outside the parent company's business, Ghana was the number one contributor to PBT or profits. So if Ghana was going to lose the money in a year, it was a big deal. So a leader's role in strategy development, I'll summarize in threefold. One is you've got to create clarity about what matters most, which means you have to decide what you won't do and what you do. At the time this happened, the banking sector, albeit that, we lend to the government, we lend to corporates, we lend to SMEs, we lend to households and individuals. There was a huge chunk of money we got out of investments. Because for those who remember, the government of Ghana bonds were had very good yields. So the banks would put money there, versus loans to the general public, right? And in a sense, and I'm sure you've learned it in school already, that government is risk-free. Yes. That real world incidents taught us that it wasn't risk-free. So I'm not saying that what you've been told isn't true, but that changed our perception. And for somebody who is an economist by training, it was difficult because we all believe that government is risk-free. But when this happened, we realized that it's not, at least not in what happened to us, right? So it then meant that we had to change the strategy, and that required that the leader has to pull everybody together to get that done. Now, in that process, you've got to make some tough choices that others usually avoid. Leadership isn't always sweet and easy. Sometimes you've got to make some, hard calls. And it means that not everybody's going to be happy about the decisions that one has to take, but they have to be made anyway. It can't be avoided. So first I spoke about clarity. Now I'm talking about the fact that you've got to make tough choices. Not just choices, but tough ones. And when we go into the Q&A, we can talk about that in detail. Because it just means that you've got to have some trade-offs. You're doing this and you won't do that. Or I'm not going to do this, but I'd rather do that. And it means you have to get out of your comfort zone and get many people out of their comfort zone as well. The third thing I want to highlight is that a leader's role in strategy, apart from clarity and making some tough choices, is also about building alignment. Alignment doesn't mean consensus, not that all of us agree this is the way to go, but all of us have to agree that under the circumstances, this is collectively the best way to go. So you have to ensure that every team member, every colleague, we are all moving in the same direction. Even those who perhaps are not for what we're doing at all, they cannot be left behind. So let me give you two other short examples. I find it easier giving the examples and then we continue. So let me just I joined Ecobank last year from my previous employer. Previously, the CEOs at Ecobank, Ghana, and Anglophone West Africa One had been male, and two had been eco-bankers. They were sort of born and bred eco-bankers. I was like an outsider, and I wasn't the norm. Okay. Very early in the day, I realized that I had to engage the colleagues, of course, all my stakeholders, but I focused primarily on the colleagues, which are the colleagues that I work with at all levels. I organized, apart from my direct reports, who I met individually before I took on the role in my home. Once I took the role, I had a meeting with them. I had a meeting with the whole bank. And then I did a lot of meeting one-on-ones, focus groups. So I'd get people that are similar. So let's say I'll take maybe Gen Zs, we'll have a discussion. I'll take millennials, we'll have a discussion. I'll take salespeople, we'll have a discussion. I'll take influencers. In every organization, there are people who are influencers, not social media influencers, influencers in the organization. They don't have to be performers, but they have a voice. So you need them in your camp as well. So I did a lot of that. The first 3 months, that's primarily what I did. And those conversations were pretty much about, in their own opinion, what's working well, what's not, what would they like to change, what should we stop doing, what should we start doing, the kind of real life questions that shape strategy. And I tried to do it in smaller groups so people would be able to speak freely and share their candid thoughts, right? And for me, it was all about not just getting the ideas, but it was also going to help me understand the organization better than any PowerPoint presentation, no matter how interesting the slides were. So even though I did the formal conversations, or I held the formal conversations with my direct reports, I did a lot of this, a lot. I don't think anybody before me had done that before. People would come to my office, and I used to hold them in my office, not in the boardroom, because I just thought, let's create an environment which is perhaps cozy, informal, and people can chat. And people would come sometimes like, hey, I've never come to the MD's office before. And I'm thinking, why not? But I won't voice that out, And all of that for me was helping me to settle in, but also helping me fully understand where I'd come so that collectively we could co-create a strategy that worked. Key is co-create, because it's not just what I think. When you get people to be part of the strategy building, you have ownership. So that was pretty much why I did that. Interestingly, and not surprisingly, when we finished that, then I also engaged my other stakeholders. Then I met with the board. We had a strategy offsite, my team and I, etc. And we disseminated it through the organization. Everybody and what you tell them, right? Because the lengthy messaging doesn't help. The narrative that most people remember is the small one. So for everybody else, we wanted to be undisputed champions in the banking sector. But there was so much flesh to it. Depending on what you do, you'd have more flesh around it. Not surprisingly, my colleagues really committed, to what we had agreed upon. And last year, my first year as the CEO, we ended the year, thanks to God and the teamwork. We're the number one bank in revenue, number one bank in PBT. We had an excellent year. And this year, at the CIMG Awards, they voted us Best Bank for last year. And I say this to say thank you to the team, albeit not all of them are here. And every quarter, I have a very transparent style. So every month I speak to the bank on Teams because, we are sort of widespread. Not all of us are in the head office. So every month I'll tell them where we are. We are a listed company. So when we haven't published the results, I'll just give you an idea that we are either tracking red, amber, or green. And then I'll tell you what's going on, what's not, what's top of mind, then I'll get them to ask questions, share ideas, etc. So we started this cultural change around more transparency, more engagement, let's build this bank together, etc. Every quarter that we were number one in revenue or PVT, then I'd give them vouchers. We all like freebies, even the one that you never use. So we give the voucher, and it's one voucher for everybody, right? So it's not a differentiated voucher. It's not your salaries, neither is it your bonus. It's we won together this quarter. Here's for everybody. So we typically would take a place like maybe Melcom, where they sell various things. There's some in East Legon, there's some in Accra High Street. So whether you wanted a mop or you wanted a bowl, you would find something to buy. So that's what we do. So it created a buzz, and month on month we'll do this, and every quarter that we won, we celebrate. So that's the good story. Again, we ended the year best bank. First year, excellent results, praise God. Year 2 begins this year. So same person, same, broadly speaking, leadership team. I just made 1 or 2 changes. But the macro environment had changed. A leader must also be mindful of the operating environment, externally and internally. And, as a leader, you deliver results through people. And, when we had a conversation, even if I said something to you and you passed it on, by the time we got to the third person, the message would have changed. Because we all focus on what's important to us. Imagine leading a bank where there are 1,500 people in Ghana before the other regions, the other countries in my region. By the time you say one thing to the next person, the person tells the other person what they hear. So continuous communication is key and is non-negotiable. Anyway, so the year begins still with the same brilliant strategy we had before. We had revised, how we're going to execute. We start the year and we realize that some things have changed. So we have to change how we execute. As a leadership team, we agree to it, at least on paper and in the boardroom. But then we realized that the team were not executing as per plan. The first quarter, this is all, we've already published our results. So it's nothing, I'm not telling you anything secret here. This is like the facts behind the figures. So the first quarter, we checked the results. We moved from number 1 to number 2. Okay, 2 over 23, still not bad, but not what we signed on to. Then the second quarter, we checked the results. We moved from number 2 revenue, number 2 PBT to we are still number 2 revenue, but number 4 PBT. I know that was how the whole bank felt. But following from the first quarter, the way our industry is, the results are published at the end of the following month. So the first quarter's results, you only get to know by 30th April. So by the time I do time with Abena or TWA, where I share everything, everybody got to know we had become number 2, right? 2-2. So not happy, but it's not, terrible. So I don't give vouchers because that's what we signed on to. 1-1, we get vouchers. We never said 2-2, we get vouchers. So no vouchers. So the team are agitated, questioning the business heads, why didn't you do this? Why are we where we are, etc. And you can see that there's accountability. The people on the call are asking for accountability not because they want the bank to move, but they didn't get their vouchers. So we are all on the same page. And then we released the second. So by May, we have sort of kicked the strategy and execution priorities. The things we had said we would do that we weren't doing, the team has started, and we're beginning to see better results. But we've lost 4 months already. So we go on to do this, and by the time the results are released again in September, we're number 2 revenue and now number 1 PBT. And so I tell the team, I thank them for bringing us back. Then since it was half, we get half a voucher, as in half the value of the voucher. But I tell the second part of the story to mean that the strategy can succeed, but it can also fail. So I wasn't going to come and just tell you that it's always like pretty, it's not. So last year, beautiful. This year, Q1, not great. Q2, even worse. But we change our execution, and Q3, we are back on plan. And for me, on hindsight, I realized that the sales team continued with the same execution priorities we had last year, even though the operating environment had changed, how to win had changed, we had communicated, but it hadn't gone into their hearts. They had heard it, but they hadn't taken it in. So they continued as is. I also realized that my leadership team, at least some of them, had also bought in, but they hadn't understood what it would take to move us forward in the changing environment. And so as we continued the conversations, it became clearer to all of us on what we had to do differently. Then we're able to pass it on, disseminate it through the organization. And it required that we did some things and are doing some things that are out of our comfort zone. And that's difficult for a lot of people. If you've gotten results by doing a particular thing all along and you need to change, a number of people find that very difficult. And that's why we had the slow start to the year. And it was only after we all got the message and owned it that we decided, or not decided, we got back to where we should be. And we are still on. It's a journey. So on hindsight, leadership didn't fully own the changes, even though we had discussed. So on PowerPoint slides and on documents, we were all aligned. In practice, we were not. And we have spent a lot of time, to do this. The team, therefore, who my leadership team sort of look after, they didn't feel the ownership. So they also didn't change how to play for us to win. So communication was poor. And we allowed the culture we had, thinking that we're already winners, to fully not just eat, but swallow the entire strategy till we had that rude awakening. You all know, as they say, culture eats breakfast, eats strategy for breakfast. And recently I also learned that leadership cooks the meal. Because it's true. Leadership sets the tone, not by just what we say, but also what we do. So after we had changed the strategy, if the leaders, my leadership team and I were doing the same things, it was the same meal. The meal hadn't changed. We couldn't get results till we changed. It took us about 5 months to switch from what we had all agreed in the last November as the new strategy for this year. But thank God we did. By May, we had course corrected, and as I said, we are back on track. So strategy execution is really where a lot of leaders fail. And execution isn't just about telling people what to do. I think sometimes that's the easiest thing, right? This is what we are going to do, and people are shouting, they understand, they'll, share their thoughts. It's not enough. It's not enough at all. Execution is about removing the roadblockers or the obstacles so that the team that on the ground can deliver results and on time. One of the things a leader has to do frequently is to be asking him or herself questions around, so what's slowing the team down? Because it's easier to just say that these guys are just not working. But it's better to ask, why aren't we getting the desired results or what we set out to do? You also have to try and understand what resources are required. Do we have them all? Which ones can we give to the team now? Which ones should we give later? And what do we do in the interim? And the leader has to know what is on people's mind that they are not talking about for you to hear. So whether they are talking about it over lunch when they are not there or around the cooler or the water cooler, you need to know. So as my people tell you, my ears are on the ground. You can translate it literally into your local dialect. My ears on the ground. I speak to a lot of people, no matter who you are. From the security men, they're my friends. One security man, to my shock, even brought me a gift. He brought me a teacup set that nobody had been as nice to him as I had been to him. I didn't even know how to respond. But the point is, you have to understand that in the organization, everybody matters. Because for us, when you enter the bank, they're the ones you even see first. If they're all gloomy, depending on who you are, you can decide that you don't even want to enter the bank or the branch. So execution isn't about commands, as I've already said. It's about effective communication, disseminating the information in simple but clear language over and over and over again, till as many people as possible get it. In the past, I've said till everybody gets it. But even if you do it 1,000 times, everybody will still get it, but majority would and run with it. It's also about empowering the team. And I was having a conversation with someone just before we came here. and she was asking me about micromanagement. And I said, you have to give the team an opportunity first. It's about empowering people to do what you're paying them to do till you realize that they're not delivering the results. Then you can go ahead, as it were, to step in. But also, execution requires discipline, a lot of it. Even when you've decided what you're going to do, you have full buy-in. It doesn't mean you get the results day one. And I think the real challenge is not giving up when it looks like, quote unquote, there's no hope. It's about continuing and sharing the team on, So then I came up with a new way of celebration, because now we're not getting the vouchers, remember? Till this October that I gave out the vouchers for year-to-date September performance. So I came up with something else where we do, Abena shout out. Now every month, based on the quarter's performance, we shout out those who were the best performers, regardless of the area. And then to my amazement, people found it so interesting. And then I have lunch with them, I have dinner with them. If they're far off, I'll let them buy lunch for themselves. So the whole bank gets to know that you're the ones that are, keeping us going, and that helps a lot. So let me just try and put this clearly. If your team cannot explain the strategy in one sentence, there's no strategy. If the team doesn't own the strategy, there's still no strategy. So even if they can communicate it and they don't own it, there's no strategy. And guess who's responsible for that simplicity? The leader and the leadership team. So now let's just shift briefly to ethics and AI. Then I'll just pause for the questions. Of course, you know better than I do, that AI has introduced a new frontier. AI is very powerful. I use it for a lot of things myself, right? I don't do cut and paste, but it helps a lot. If I'm going to see a customer in a particular industry and I haven't read exhaustively on the industry as an example, one of the things I'll do is to plug it in, as much information as possible. And I get a lot about, not that customer, but the industry, whether in Ghana or outside. So you can have good conversation when you see the customer, even ask the right questions. That's one of the most useful ways of AI to me personally. But we all know that anything that is incredibly powerful can also be potentially dangerous. And that's where the conversation around ethics also comes in. Because as we know, AI also has the ability to amplify things a lot. It amplifies bias, it amplifies inequality, even amplifies speed. And depending on what you're using it for, perhaps it's a good thing. It also amplifies mistakes. If you typed in the wrong thing and it gave you the response and you sort of took it word for word, it can be totally off as well. But AI also amplifies impact. This means that as a leader, one has to be now very, 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 very keen and focused on values. Remember, I'm running a bank. There's always, as an example, a conversation around sustainability and profitability. And I'm not talking about a conversation as we sit around the table and have this conversation. It's around what maybe salespeople will do, right? Because their bonuses may be tied to profit. It doesn't mean you have to do things in a way that is not sustainable. And so we try as much as possible to set very smart KPIs, but also to make sure that we hold a lot of conversations, dialogue around how AI in itself is changing the way we work and how each of us has to do things differently and the lens that we must use. It also shows that one has to be asking different questions. Sometimes if AI pulls out data, it pulls data from a particular, data set and it leaves others behind. But the leader must recognize that and pull others in to make it inclusive, And then there are all the issues on environmental, sustainability, and governance, which I won't go into now or will never finish today. AI in itself is not just a technical tool. Over time, and I'm sure you've all seen, heard, read, because there are thousands of articles really about AI. It's also a governance challenge. It's a societal challenge. It's a huge leadership challenge as well. Sometimes you give consultants a job to do for you, and they just go and sit either in front of ChatGPT or other, put it in and bring it to you, forgetting that you can actually also check if they've done a thorough research and field work versus just putting it in AI. And so by the time you are having a direct dialogue with them, they're unable to answer the questions. Those are some of the things we all should guard against. I already spoke about sustainability, which can no longer be ignored. So, for me, in summary, I've said a lot of things, but like I said, I want to focus on the conversation with you, the dialogue. Leadership is not the title leader. So, the leader isn't what my title is. The leader is the person you are becoming and you become before we all get to know who you are. The day you are announced as a leader publicly, you already are a leader. You have been building that over time when nobody was watching, when nobody was listening. Thankfully, no cameras on you. So you were yourself and you learned along the journey. For me, that's what leadership is. Driving the desired results through people with clarity, with ability to make decisions, even tough ones, and to pull everybody along so that there's ownership, so that we can deliver whatever objective or results that we set out to deliver. And at the same time, do so within the confines of our values, on time, and on plan. But before I end, I want to ask you a question before we get into the Q&A. Is there anything I said that you disagree with? So that person should start the conversation. Is there anything that I said that leadership requires challenge as well? You can't be a leader if you get, concerned when somebody says, oh, well, what you said, I don't agree. So I want to start from there. Is there anything that I said that you vehemently disagree with in your experience? It's very different from what I've said. I want to start that conversation with you. Please go ahead.
All right. So you talked about the fact that leadership is about clear communications, where the leader has to communicate what it is that they are trying to do to the team. But then I've also realized that there are certain situations that the leader does not just want to communicate because they might take your word for certain things. Say today, there are a lot of issues going around in Ghana where they're talking about prosecutions and all of that around governance. And I'm sure if somebody is to ask the president today about that, he will say that he doesn't have anything to say about that, just so that people will not take your word in a different context. So for me, I think there are times that the leader does not have to communicate everything clearly to the people, just reserve certain things, just so that they will also go and figure out themselves.
No, thank you. And that's true. Very, very true and accurate. The good thing is that I'm not a political leader. I'm a leader in a corporate organization or entity. And so the conversations we have are apolitical. They are pretty much around the business, our strategy, our stakeholders, etc. But even with that, and to your point, it's everything that can be communicated because there's time and place. So if I go for a board meeting and I come back, I may not say everything to the team. I can't. But everything that they must know, I will communicate. Because if I haven't communicated, how will they know? So yes, I agree with what you said. And I just want to put it in context that, yes. So if I have a group, I also sit on the group executive committee. When we have meetings and I come back to my team, it's not everything that I'll tell them, right? I'll tell them the ones they must know. But everything they must know, I must say and not leave them in the dark. So that's what I meant. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? And again, I'm open to challenge, questions, observations, anything at all. Yes.
Okay. Hi. I will have a question. So considering your different roles, or no, actually, considering the different organizations here that you've worked with, do you find yourself in any conflicts of interest when it comes to bringing on board strategies? I mean, you've worked in Barclays Bank, now ABSA, and Standard Chartered, I believe, yeah. So you have information about them, you have insider information. Do you find yourself in a position where there's some conflicts of interest and confidentiality issues, and how do you deal with it?
No, good question. You know, confidentiality is one of the, it's like a foundation for banking. If you are not confidential, I know when people see that you don't even run away. Because you know the ones who owe and are not paying, you know the ones that you understand. So confidentiality is like basic, it's not negotiable. That's point one. But also, you see, even if you date a particular person and it doesn't work, and you're dating a second person, you can't carry everything from that first relationship into the second relationship. It's about people, and the parameters are not the same. So you cannot take a strategy from one place and just take it and plant it elsewhere. It won't work because the things that you're trying to solve, or the internal operating environment, are different. I can tell you for a fact, Standard Chartered Bank is very different from Barclays. Even Barclays different from ABSA, even though, yes, two very different organizations. But if you didn't work in both, you think it's just a continuation. It's not. And Ecobank is very different from all the other three as well. So they are very different, you know. I mean, to give you an example, at Ecobank, the average person has been there for a much longer time. I'm the one going to tell them that everything they've done so far doesn't work. A new kid on the block, you have all the answers. No, you can't. But you could do that where I came from, right? Because you've been with them, and you were losing a parent, you're losing a parent of Barclays and getting to a smaller parent. So you all sort of work together. Okay, so it's nothing like that. And even the challenges in every organization are also different. So you have to understand. That's why I said I always start with what's working, what's not, what would you like to stop? What should we start doing? And I also even ask the question, if you were in my shoes as the CEO at this particular point in time, what will you do? I've asked that question many times. You hardly ever get the same results, even though as you do it over and again, you realize that there are some themes that come out of it. So actually, you can't take one and take it there. The other is the people that you're working with are also very different. So even if the environment was the same, it's still not the same people. So how can you deliver the same results, right? So it's a lot of factors. You see, I think what's really important is having a good understanding of the operating environment, both external and internal, and working with the team and through the team to deliver whatever those results are. Okay.
Hi, I'm Hilary Kofi. And my question is, you've taken over leaders. So, for instance, Patience, I think, retired or resigned and then you came on board. And with every leader comes like your own ideologies, your own strategy ideas. How do you, and you mentioned this before, like the new kid on the block, you have your own ideas, right? How did you handle taking the people from the old strategy they were used to, like sort of bringing them on board with your new plans? It's that strategy dissonance, if I should say it.
So when I joined Ecobank, my colleague Dan was the outgoing MD. Excellent by all standards, but we are different. Okay, so that, but no two people are the same. Neither are two leaders the same. So his leadership style and my leadership style are not the same. It doesn't mean that that person wasn't doing a good job. You've got to play to your own strengths as well. Plus, remember, the operating environment is dynamic, if you know what I mean. And that's why even in the choice of a leader, somebody might be a good leader in a particular environment, but may not be the right leader for another environment or a particular point in time. Okay. So what I do is, so for example, joining Ecobank, I never rubbish what somebody has done before I enter. I feel like it's disrespectful, first of all. So I acknowledge their good work. And then, like I said, I spend a lot of time with the team collectively in different, forms to try and understand from their own views, what they think a winning bank should look like, what we should do, differently, what we should stop. So in a sense, I'm asking them these strategic questions in everyday language because I want us to co-create it. I don't want it to be something that I've come up with and I'm just handing over. So I did a lot of that and I still do. I'm always doing that because that's the only way, because the reality is that even as a leader, if you're not careful, you be in your own tower and you know what's going on. So to prevent that from happening, you should always keep engaging. And I don't mean just engaging and having lectures, but having the conversations around these simple things that actually form and shape strategy. That's the way to go, because there isn't a one size fits all, you see. And that somebody came before you doesn't mean you have to do the same thing. And if there are elements of what they did that was good, of course, you acknowledge that and you continue with that as well. You don't have to change everything because you're new. No, at all. All the ones that are still relevant, you continue with and work with the team to work, or rather to improve upon or build upon, perhaps is a better word, build upon what he or she had started. So you take it to the next level. That's what it should be.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Michael, and I've enjoyed the conversation so far. My question has to do with your experience with or similar to the experience with the restructuring of the government bonds. I mean, here at Tashesi, there are times we are forced to do projects and stuff. I don't genuinely see why I'm doing this, but I have to do it because at the very least, my grade depends on it. And similarly for you, your bottom line depends for it. Now, my question is, how do you lead teams of people when you, the leader, you didn't ask for this project? It's a project you're not passionate about, but you have to do it because it's part of your role. And what are some of the mental strategies and battles you go through to be able to effectively lead a team through such a project? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. What a candid question. But yes, you see, there are a number of things that happen as a leader that one either isn't prepared for or not enthused about, but you must lead anyway. 6 months into when I first became an MD, it's one day, one afternoon, I think it was less than 6 months, one afternoon, it was on Joy FM that the bank that I was working for, has frivolous quotes on FX. If you are in the industry, frivolous FX quotes means they can seize your license. Here I am, a first-time MD, and this is happening. You can imagine the group are calling you, the colleagues are shouting, everybody is as if, London Bridge is falling down, honestly. Everybody is disturbed. I didn't have a playbook. I didn't sign on to that. At that time, I don't even think I had ChatGPT. I couldn't have checked what to do when such a thing happens. There was none. So what I had to do was immediately, call my colleague who used to look after the head of global markets where this happened. We had a conversation around what's going on. He gave me his side of the story. I said, you should just relax. I then called my driver and I went straight to the regulator, the governor's office. Of course, the governor's PA, you have to build relationships as a leader. So the governor's PA, I told her it was urgent. So even though he was busy, she said I should come and sit there. And if she gets 5 minutes, she'll allow me to see him. I got there, saw Mr. Governor as I called him at the time, and, told him that this was happened. Interestingly, the director that took that out hadn't even gotten the governor's clearance. But it was out there already. I mean, it's already happened. What do we do? It's now about solutioning. I remember my Africa CEO, Peter Matlari, may so rest in peace. We lost him during COVID. He was like, Abena, we're flying down and coming to solve. I said, Peter, what will you do when you come? How are you going to solve it when you come? When you come, I have to take you to whoever you want to go and see. So there was no need, So this is one of those cases where it's almost like you can decide to say, my colleague created, a challenge. But it wasn't him. You can also decide to say that the regulator is giving you a tough time. But that's also not true. But it's already happened. The leader's role is to find a solution. So immediately I got into, that mode, trying to identify who is objective enough that I can run this by, and to understand who do I even talk to apart from the governor. I spent the whole afternoon and evening in such conversations till it became very clear to me at the time that President or Vice President Boemia, who was then the Vice President is always the Chief of the Economic Council. Okay. So it became very clear that he was the only person that could help solve the problem. So I had to figure out how I'd get access to him over that holiday period so that he would put in a word. One thing led to another. I got that done. He got them to change it, but it took another 6 to 8 weeks before it was reversed. I remember very well the day that it was reversed. I was in South Africa and my Africa CEO literally lifted me up because they thought that the whole bank was going to lose its license. So the point I'm making is it doesn't matter what happens. The thing about leadership is that you have to be on the go. So you don't have the luxury of being enthused about a situation because the buck stops with you actually, for good or for whatever other word you want to use. So you don't have a choice. So in leadership, you just don't do what you want to do. You do what is best for the organization at that point in time. And that can be challenging. During that period, I showed up, bold, strong. But between God, my mother and my husband, they knew that it wasn't easy. There were times that I'd cry. I mean, out of frustration, what's all this? Yeah, I remember I'm also... Thank you. But many a time, I'd pray about it. And my forever encouraging husband would tell me that we'll get over it. And we did. But the journey between frivolous quotes in the papers, on Reuters, on Bloomberg, everywhere, my colleagues panicking, the board panicking, everybody panicking, I could only do one thing: aim to get us to cross the line. Not because I had the answers, but I had to find them. So unfortunately in leadership, you don't have that luxury. You just have to find the solution. So you have to find those who can help you to solve the problem. So I hope I've answered your question, Michael.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm Ademilade Adebanjo. So the question I have is basically, I know you said that, in the bank and in the corporate environment, you're apolitical, so, there's no stance. But then what about the politics in the bank? Like, I know you spoke about what you say to your team and you keeping information and you relinquishing information, telling them what they need to know. But like, how do you manage these situations where you can see there's some politics happening amongst the people that you manage, or maybe even those in other banks or other situations that you work with? Because there's always going to be politics. We're human. Somebody wants to do this. Somebody wants to do this. So do you have to like tiptoe around certain situations? Are you headstrong about certain situations? How do you manage some of these situations?
Oh, thank you. Is anybody here who's married? You can be married and be a student. None of you is. Okay. Anybody, well, all of you came from a home, so at least you've seen that in a house, even if you have 2 or 3 house help, there can be politics. One person can say, this person didn't give me meat, like I used to have this nanny, and they would say that, she was reducing their meat. I mean, like, that cannot be a whole conversation. So wherever there are more than 2 or 3 people gathered, there will be that kind of either misunderstanding or politics or people trying to look better than others. When I said we are apolitical, it means we don't identify with the government. Just for clarity, that's what I meant. Okay. Now, in a workplace, there are those who believe that, just by getting to know people, they can maneuver their way to a particular level. The only truth about that is that it's not sustainable. So even if you fooled a few people, you can't fool everybody. Okay. The second is wherever there are more than 2 or 3 people, there'll always be misunderstanding. And that's why it's absolutely critical to be very clear what the values are and have a clear way of work, what we will take and what we will not tolerate, so that it guides how we all work. Because you cannot, we've all been brought up differently, regardless of where we're coming from, so those happen. But I think that's where the how, which is the values, matter, because then that define how we have agreed that in this particular organization we will work. Will there be people, stepping on the other's toes? Obviously. I'm sure I've been here. Some people step on your toes. Yeah. How do you manage it? Sorry? Yes. Wherever there are a number of people, that would happen. But it's about having the conversation. That's why I think that, authenticity is everything. So if I heard you said something about me, I can handle it a number of ways. One is to pretend I don't know. That's one way of handling a matter. Another is to coming to you and say that, hey, really, I heard you said this about me. You see, I didn't confront you. I didn't, see you and eye you or go and say you've done something wrong. Depending on the matter and the importance, I choose one of the two. Sometimes it's good not to focus on. There are some issues that are small. You have to just let them go. But there's some issues where you need to set the record straight. But you do so respectfully. And it's the same. Remember, it's the same whether you're an organization, whether you're in uni or you're at home. These conversations must be held. They just must be held respectfully. And people don't always agree. But at least you have to align that this is where we draw the line.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about your life's journey, your background, because there are some people here that don't really know what they want to do with their lives, but they want to achieve or go down a similar route or do something similar to what you did. If you don't mind, can you please share a bit about your background and how you got to where you are now? Thank you.
It's a lengthy question. So
Sorry.
give me what exactly do you want to know about the background? So I focused. Do you understand? Because they're very lengthy. That alone, that's what kept us there for longer than the lecture itself. So if you are more specific, then I'll just zoom in.
Okay.
Yes.
Education, career.
Okay. Still long. I'll just. So I went to Morning Star School. Then I went to Wesley Girls from 1 to 5 at the time. Did my O levels. Went to Ashimota for 6th form. Went to University of Ghana, Legon. Studied economics, statistics, and French. Before then, I was a science student. I was also a math student. And then after that, I did my service, worked for a short while, and then went to do my MBA at Manchester Business School. One thing led to another. A company brought me to Ghana to work. I never started. I went to another firm to work, that which was Standard Chartered. I worked there, and I was moved unwillingly, during my maternity leave. I came back and I'd been moved to a team I didn't like. It became my biggest blessing in my career, I learned, I grew, I became senior very early because when I was faced with that sort of move, which I didn't like, I got good advice that helped me to be the best of me, even though I wasn't enjoying it. You know what I mean? It wasn't part of my plan, you know. And then from there, I moved on from Stanchat. I moved on to Barclays as executive director for CIB. The rest, I think, are all on LinkedIn. Yes. But if you were to ask me what I think differentiates me, I think for me, and I was telling the team earlier that I grew up very timid, like very, very timid, not even shy. When I was young, my mother says I'd go into a bucket when we got visitors. As I got older, I'll put the bucket on my head. Anyway, I'm not going to see you, that basically, whichever way it took. But over time, I think I realized that that wasn't real. I mean, that's a different day story. I'm not going to go into how I I moved out of that. So I find that a number of things that describe me from my own perspective. One is I'm very resilient. So I don't look as tough as I am. That's point one. Number two is I always is an exaggeration, but I usually take a long-term view of matters. So I'm the kind of girl who never dreamt of a wedding day, but I dreamt of my husband. That doesn't make sense. Yeah. Because the wedding day for me is one day. Where but the marriage is longer. So I'm long term compared to most people. I think the third for me is that I am relentlessly curious and I'm never embarrassed or ashamed to learn. So in my team, wherever I've worked, I always have, a millennial, a Gen Z in my office. That's like my slides. When I said I was coming, a young man in my office, he did some interesting slides which I was supposed to share with you, but I didn't get to it. Because they also keep me on my toes and it makes me realize I learn from everybody. I think in summary, or maybe the other one would be, I also am not fooled that most people relate to the chair. The title is a chair. Whoever comes in, people hold you in high esteem. So it's not about you. What you do whilst you're in the chair is what matters. But people just revere a chair. So it cannot, I'm not one of those who, I was telling somebody earlier, nothing wrong if you do it. It's not wrong. It's just not my preference. That I get up, one person holding my bag, another holding my water. I'm like, what is this? Thank God I still, have my two hands so I can hold it. Nothing wrong if somebody else does it, but I don't want that. Because the way that I see it, if you allow people, they'll let you begin to think that, yes, and that's why everybody calls me Abena. No Auntie Abena or Miss Abena or any name like that. I don't like it. If you call me in the workplace, if you call me any other name from Abena, I just won't mind you. Just to set the record straight, because the person you refer to as Auntie Abena or Miss Abena or Mrs. Abena, the conversation you have with that person is different from the conversation you have with somebody you call Abena. You can try it. The two are not the same. So I think in a sense, those are some of the things that, and I'm not embarrassed to get help. I do it easily. I don't think I know everything. Neither do I have the plan to get to know everything. It's not part of my plan, but I'm able to deliver results through people. That's my plan.
Thank you, Abena. Okay, so my question is, Ghana is known to be one of the countries that has a collectivist culture. And you spoke about how you give vouchers to the team as a tactic to reach your set goal. And you also spoke about shout out with Abena, where you praise the individuals that did a good job. And my question is, how are you able to balance the teamwork and giving praise to the individuals when it's more of like a collectivist culture? People are more focused on teamwork. And yeah, thank
No,
you.
thank you. We do both, or should I do both? So whilst I shout out the names of the individuals who have excelled, I also shout out the teams that have excelled. So we also do every quarter, we know the best performing branches. So if you're on the branch and you're even asleep, you get to enjoy. the benefit, right? Yes. So I do both. It's really important, right? Because end of the day is a game and there's a team that are playing, and as I told the team earlier, even if you are the fastest person up, you don't pass the ball to somebody else, you may not score the goal, so I do both. As a matter of fact, I do both. Yes.
Hi, Abena. So, in my very little experience of being a leader, there have been times when my personal values didn't match a decision I had to take. What do you do in those situations?
It's a good question. When your personal values don't match what you have to do you want a candid answer? Don't do it. Because unless it's just, it depends on how deep the thing is, right? If it's something that you know is wrong and will haunt you, why will you do it just for today? It might mean that you may be seen as not ready for that particular role, but it's okay. Over time, people respect those who are able to speak up and say, this is what I stand for. This is what I don't stand for. They may not like it in the beginning, but people respect that actually. They respect the fact that when it comes to this kind of thing, she's not going there. It's fine. Even if they call you names, what do you care? That's the worst case scenario, right? In a uni, they'll probably call you, they'll give you some strict names. Is that what they do to you already? Yeah. But you in as long as you are very clear, it's fine. And that's why everybody must also be clear. There's a set of values for the school, but you must also have your personal values. And in an ideal way, there should be, there should be some overlap. Not that every single one, but broadly speaking, so that there are things that you don't stand for. It's okay. Let me give you an example. So a young person came to me and said to me that they they're a vegetarian, and not just for health reasons but for religious reasons, and they had gotten an opportunity to work in a place where the raw material was sort of meat or beef based, and they were uncomfortable. But the dilemma they had was they had been at home for a long time, and their parents were like, you've got a job, just take it and stop this. I'm not comfortable with this, right? It's one of those things that it depends on you. Somebody might say, oh, but it's not a big deal. But it's a choice you have to make. Maybe beef is mild. Let me use alcohol or cigarette. That somebody might think that because of what they believe in, they are not comfortable. What do you do when you're an RM? Actually, that's a good question. You are an RM for a company that produces not just one, both alcohol and cigarette. She said age. So then if you're uncomfortable with that, then you just don't take that job. But it takes a bold and a strong person to say, this doesn't tie in with my values. It doesn't mean the person, you're not judging. And it's really important that values isn't about judging somebody else. It's about saying, this is what I will or will not do. If somebody else is comfortable and they're doing it, you're not supposed to be saying, look at what she's doing. So I think that, and you have to balance that as a leader. You can't say that because you won't do it, everybody else doing it, is to be, on red alert. No. It sounds tricky, but over time, you find your feet. And if you feel very strongly about something, I think you shouldn't take it, right? Because you won't do a good job. So be a disservice to yourself, but also to your employer and to even the customers and to your colleagues. But most importantly, isn't to judge others, and as long as that's what you have chosen, don't use that as the parameter for everybody else. I think that's also not fair. I see some hands up at the back.
Yeah. Should I speak also?
Okay, we'll take yours and then we'll go to the back.
Yes, please. Thank you so much. During your submission, you emphasized a lot about leadership having to do with people and the essence of bringing people together to achieve a goal, at least most people, not all people. But have you encountered a situation where some key players, they say influential people in the company, do not agree with your idea, and how do you appease them? Because in those situations, they also call some shots. So how do you relate with them? I know we'll have conversations, but if those conversations do not pan out how you want it, like what are the next steps you take? And I think finally, because of the time and all, when we were speaking, you emphasized a lot about family support system, your husband a lot, your mother, God, your nannies, your driver, and everyone, and how you appreciate everyone. And it's quite interesting because these days, I think as women or as ladies, sometimes it's like, oh, focus on yourself, focus, get that career, get that bag. But it looks like you also give examples of how you sacrifice some things for your marriage. So I don't know, can you expand a bit more here on your views on balancing with career and marriage or career and personal family life? Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's start with the first one, which is short. After we've had the conversations over and again, and we are not making progress, what's the next step? What do you think the next step will be? Yes. That's another way. I said leadership is tough. Leadership is tough. If we can't work together, one person has to leave. Who's leaving? Because before we get there, we would have had many conversations, right? So if it's not going to work, I think we just have to move on. So that's the simple answer. And I find that a lot of leaders are unable to do that. Because, we are nice Ghanaians. You don't want somebody to go and say, you don't believe what she did. No, it's not personal, it's work. And for you to do that, it means you should have exhausted all other options. So we pack that. What I meant, or in my story, because you see, we don't live in a vacuum. And especially, I'm not a man, so I can only talk from a woman's perspective. Is that okay? Yes. So for women, okay, I'm married and I have children. So there's always responsibility at home too, no matter the amount of help you have. My late father used to say that they are helping you, they are not replacing you. So no matter how tired you are and you go home, you have to make sure that some things are in place, right? Whether it's food, whether it's toiletries, whether, if you're like me, I like a garden, my garden should be beautiful. You may think it's unnecessary, for me it's necessary. I mean, and everything else in between. Do you understand? So, and I've been working, like I said, for 30 years now. So 95, this 2025, you see. So I cannot not have a support system. I'm not saying that everybody requires, it's always important. I always emphasize what I say. But for me, I couldn't have made it without the support system. I know there are people who say that, oh no, I want to be able to do everything myself, praise God. But I'm not there. I need that support system because you see, first of all, even if you start work, depending on where you live, there's a lot of traffic in Ghana. If you are to drive 3 hours to Accra High Street in the morning and 3 hours back home, that's 6 hours of drive time. No matter how pleasant you are, by the time you go home, you'll probably be fighting your spouse. Because one little thing, you're tired. So I took the decision that what are the things that Abena must do herself? And what are the things that somebody else can do for me? So that's how I run my life. There are some things that I must do myself. But there are some things that I must do myself. And I'm very clear. I have no iota of doubt around the things I don't want outsourced. At the same vein, I also am very clear around the things I want outsourced. And there are some that you need a combo or a hybrid. You see, and it varies. There isn't a one size fits all. So that's what I meant. So I always get that help. Indeed, sometimes you are blessed and you have a mother-in-law who are supportive. I've had both, but I'm not an only child. Okay, so when it was only me, I'm the firstborn. Then my mother was available fully. By the time my sister started having children, she's not available to only you. So if you don't have a good nanny, for example, you're on your own. When are you going to, do you understand? If you're at work, somebody has to be looking after your children. If my mother has traveled because my sisters were all outside, what do I do? So for me, I took a decision that when I find my own staff, those who work for me, who are good, I really look after them in a way that you can't push them. I remember my sisters who used to live outside would say they'll come for mine. And I'm like, even if you give her dollars or pounds, you won't go. Because there are the extra things that you do that make people feel really appreciated. And I'm a master at that. I am. Yeah. Because I do it intentionally, not because I'm the best person, but I do it intentionally, very intentionally. When I started working, I took a decision as an example that, I'd always, most of the time I have a ponytail or I braid my hair. Now my hair is natural. But I took a decision, for example, that I wouldn't buy human hair because it was expensive. I'd rather use that money to support auntie. Auntie was a children's nanny. This is not something I'll write in LinkedIn. But then it meant that I could travel with her and my family. So if my husband wants to go out at night, auntie is still there. But these are sacrifices I had to make. Another sacrifice would be, how some people measure the food they eat, so they buy rice for house and rice for, I don't do that. Auntie is fancy. Sandra knows auntie. And auntie likes everything, with extra oil, extra sugar, extra milk. So I'll wake up in the morning, decide that maybe I'll go and do my shopping at Ogugushi or at some place where it's not expensive. Okay. A day comes when you don't have to count your coins and you can shop anywhere. But till that day, that's what I used to do. Now I don't go there. Not because I don't want to. I'm even too busy to make that time. So I've created a job and letting somebody else go there so they can also be paid. You see? So I think it's about that balance, both at home and at work. So that's what I meant by that, And there are things that, again, you may not be comfortable with. There isn't a one size fits all. You must choose what you are comfortable with. I think that's what's worked for me.
Hi, good afternoon. What are some decisions you've made over the course of your career which you'd change if you had the chance?
Good question. I think the first decision I would have changed was never to have stayed in a role for too long. That's one of the decisions that I would change. The second, and perhaps the easiest one, was when I started out, I used to wait till I had a perfect answer or perfect question before I'd raise my hand to contribute. It's not an exam. And those who practice become better. I wish I hadn't done that, actually. It took me a while before I gained the confidence to be able to contribute without thinking that, what if what you're saying is stupid? Who cares? But it took me a while. If I were to start again, I won't do that. I'll just go with the flow. Ask the question, if you all think it's stupid, so what? But that's how we learn. And I found when I look back, those who do that do very well in life because they learn. They are not so concerned about, what if they all laugh at me? I mean, yeah, it's cool. Who cares if somebody's laughing at you? You are working. Who cares if somebody's laughing at you? So those are things I'll change if I were to start again. Those two, speaking up and not waiting for perfect answers or questions, and not staying in a role for too long. Because there's so much you can work, so much you can learn, Yeah. But those two definitely I'll change today.
Good afternoon. So my question is especially in the aspect of the growing trend of freelancers and remote workers. So how is Ecobank coming up with the payments methods with the use of Bitcoin or with the use of cryptocurrency, especially in terms maybe of with the Bitcoin article that will be launched in the US next year?
I can see you read a lot and you've been following what's happening. So last week, the regulator, the central bank, had a celebration, CD at 60. And I spoke during the end. I think my panel was around a similar kind of question, right? It requires, first of all, that there is sufficient regulation in place. That's the first big thing. It doesn't matter that there are either cryptos, etc., from the big techs. The reality is you need to make sure that they are regulated. You only get to understand this when you've lost on an investment before. That regulation matters. So as a bank, we are looking at it. We are partnering with the regulator. We are partnering with different stakeholders. But we are not going to jump in blindly. We are going to jump in with our eyes open, with absolute clarity around what the risks are, what the returns are, and we put the right mitigants in place. So that's what I'd say. But yes, we see it as the future. That's going to happen. And whoever gets ready first would get the benefit.
Please, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please, I agree with you with what you said concerning as a leader, when you are communicating the strategy to your members, you have to be clear for them to understand and also communicate the essence. But my question lies where you said that if your members are not able to communicate the strategy into a single sentence, that it's not a valid strategy. Not everybody is that smart or eloquent to compress everything into a single sentence, right? Because we are taught that when you are creating a strategy, you have to consider the goals of the company, the vision, the mission, and their resources and how sustainable that strategy will be. So if the person is able to understand the strategy and the person is able to use it to execute a work, then I don't think communicating it should be a problem. No matter the number of sentences the person can use to communicate, I think it doesn't matter.
No, that's a good one. What I meant, let me try and... So I agree. Our strategy in itself, in a summarized form, is on a page. It's a whole page. But on that page, there's a sentence that everybody runs with. It doesn't mean we don't have all the things you said. We do. But there's a sentence that we all align with. And it's not about just being smart or not being smart. It's about what sticks. And end of the day, I think your point around if the person is delivering, yes, you have to understand the strategy to deliver. But when you are delivering through people, that's the difference. It's not just what you understand. If you understand and you are not able to communicate, so when I say that the leader isn't just me and my leadership team or my direct reports, anybody in the organization who is looking after 2 or more members is a leader because others are looking up to them. And we're all at different levels. So the complexity is not the same and should not and cannot be the same. So that's what I was trying to communicate. Okay, so it's about breaking it down in such a way and manner. Understanding it is one thing because you use it to work, but it's how you also disseminate that information to the one that is working or reporting to you. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Yes. So that's why, you'll be amazed that sometimes it gets lost in transition. And that's why you have to communicate over and over and over again. Yes. The reality is that the theory and the practice are not always the same. I'm not saying they are different either. You see, they're not different, but in practice, some things are not black and white. In fact, most things, very few are.
Greetings there.
Hello.
My name is Frank.
I really like your greetings there. I'll use it next time.
Okay. Touching a little bit on the AI policy, I hope you've heard about the information about the Deloitte scandal, where they released, let's say, factually wrong information and
Yeah.
they had used generative AI. And I would ask you, from your perspective, first of all, have you ever received any report, let's say, from your team that was AI generated and it had a little bit, and second, what's your stance on AI in the job? Because here we're starting to use AI here and there, and basically, where would you draw the line? Because we're trying to prepare ourselves for working in the field, and kind of using AI a lot might be a problem, but also not using it can hurt us.
No, thank you. So I use AI and I use it a lot. Actually, I took a course, apart from learning it, on my iPad. I also took a course in Harvard because AI is the way to go. However, as I said earlier, it also carries some significant risks, but it presents a lot of opportunities. At the workplace, we use AI. Everybody has access to Copilot. Most people have access to ChatGPT. But let's say I'm coming here and I tell somebody to put together slides on a topic. If all they did was to get content from AI, that I could have also just typed that question in 5 or 10 minutes, even if it was a very detailed one, and also get that. But it's supposed to help guide you in this example that I'm using around the kind of things I should talk about. So let me tell you, I also used AI before coming here. Let me tell you what I did. So I actually put in, I hope it's not wiped out, I'll read it out to you. So it was something around how the CEO should position a lecture to final year students in strategy that would be engaging and not similar to what they've been learning in class. I mean, I've summarized it, right? Yes. And the one thing that came up as an example was it's better to share the stories. So I'm telling you how I use AI. So I didn't get my story from there. The story is my story. But there are many ways I could have done come in a lot of ways. I could have done the PowerPoint presentation, which is what I still have. We could have gone into groups and just do, some group work. That would have also worked. But I chose this one. So for me, it's about what you think works best because I wanted it to be engaging. So that's one. On the Deloitte matter, we get that. And we get that not just from, I'm not talking about Deloitte in particular, but the other consultants or other people that we work with, right? So you can give somebody a work to do and all they'll do is reproduce that, But we all know that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a little bit more than that. But as I said earlier, if I'm going to see a client, I'm just looking for information around, a particular industry, what kind of questions I should be asking for, what are the key success factors in that industry. I could get it at a touch of a button. If it's just 2 minutes to the meeting, I can get that. That's useful to me. I said to the earlier team that I engaged that we're looking for graduate trainees. We're looking for 18 or 20 people. We got about 20,000 applicants. This was last year. If I've got 20,000 applicants, I'm not sure who's going to go through every, CV to figure out who's good. So we had to rely on AI to be able to shortlist. But then that's the danger. What if there were biases? So you have to then again sample to check for inclusivity as an example. So it's the way to go. And that's why using it, ethically is not negotiable. It cannot be ignored, actually. Again, I shared an earlier example where if it's financial analysis, you can take a company's financial report, put it in AI. They can give you an assessment of the financial performance in a way that very few human brains can crack. But they cannot answer the questions on the whys. It still requires you to engage to get the answers. So it's complementary is what I'd say. And it allows you to do things quickly, faster. It amplifies your results, as I said. It doesn't replace what you're supposed to do. Yes.
Hi. So my question is, before you started your career, were there boundaries that you put in place, and in your 30 years of your of working, where these boundaries readjusted, like made loose or made tighter? Yeah.
Give me an example of a boundary. Yeah, give me an example. Not any boundary. Give me an example so I can understand the question better.
Okay, so maybe I don't know, my boundary.
No, not yours. Any boundary. I want to understand the question better. That's all.
Okay, maybe I would do my work this way, or I wouldn't something like.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I do. So they're not all. Because before I started work, right? So I'm going to tell you as is. So one was I always told myself that I would package myself as I was senior, even when I was junior. Do you understand what that means? So I entered a bank. So I'll dress like the bank manager, even though I'm not. That's one of the things I told myself. Another thing I told myself was that when I work in a place, I don't want my family to be coming for their loans. Then what if they don't pay? Not that they won't pay, but it's because you don't even want people to just help them because of you. The third thing I told myself was that I'd make sure that I'll be good at what I do. And if I don't, I'll ask for help. But those were the things I told myself that I'll do. Have they changed over time? I think so. I think if you called me 10 years ago to give a lecture, I probably won't come in jeans. COVID made me realize that was okay. I mean, I would have come in a t-shirt, but Regina would have had a fit. You see, so there's some things that are not as important as I thought they were. So it's about continuous changing. For me, I'm always looking how I can transform. So if I was doing something in the past, your question was specific to when I started. That's why I answered it that way. What I look out for today is not that. But that's what I looked out for then. That's what I used to position myself.
Do you have any leaders or leadership styles that you use as references or templates, or you're kind of an on-the-go form of leader, for lack of a better term?
I don't know actually, but what I know is that leadership can be learned. It can actually be learned. Some people appear to be natural leaders, if there's any such thing. But leadership can be learned. I've been through a journey of self-improvement, to transform myself to the leader that I am today. There are some things that guide me, or maybe I have some guiding principles. One for me is that I always want to give other people's life a meaning. It's actually one of the things that I identify with as a person. The other for me is that a leader shouldn't also take themselves too seriously. Like, do you understand? You shouldn't take yourself so seriously. You did something, you didn't do it well, you apologize, you move on. I told the team earlier on that I do a humility audit. Maybe if I spoke in a way I shouldn't, or I did something I shouldn't, I have no problem coming back to you to apologize. I do that all the time. But above all, I think a leader should be true to him or herself and know that it's actually a position of privilege to serve. It's not like you're not a leader. And here I'm going to change the word, especially you're not in a leadership role because you're the only one who can do that role or hold that role. So when you have it, you have a duty of care to make sure you give off your best. And at the same time, respect those that you are working with or for, or those you are working through. That's how I see it. Ultimately, it's a responsibility. A huge one at that, especially when things are not going the way you want. But when things are going the way you want, it's like a holiday or a party. But the reality is that both occur. And it's about showing up regardless, knowing that the whole team is looking at you. Let me tell you, as part of my journey, there was a day that I think I'd gone on vacation with my family. My family were young at the time. And we came back and I realized that a client we really trusted had duped the banking sector. And the bank that I was working for, they had duped us as well. At the time, it was about $25 million that was going off the PBT. You can imagine. This is years back. I mean, I was downgraded, let's say if 5 was the highest rating, I was downgraded to a 2. Yes, I've lost money. Whether I did it myself or not wasn't the issue. But remember, I didn't lose it. I had the RM, I had the head of trade sales who interfaced with the clients. But guess who had to carry the load? The leader. So whilst it was a very difficult time for me, I come to work and I show up strong for the team. Because when you crumble, the whole team feel like there's no hope. You understand? Yes. So leadership in itself, is how you show up when things are working and when things are not. You're not pretending that everything is okay. but you are being strong for the team and looking at where we want to get to so that the distractions, which are many, don't get you off track. Hope I've answered your question. Okay.
Yeah, so hello.
Hello.
All right. So I was coming to ask that some of us were aspiring to go into the sector you're in. So I wanted to know, aspiring to go into the banking sector.
Okay.
So I wanted to know like how you came from college and the amount of the steps you took up the hierarchy to be a CEO. And also the second question I was coming to ask was about like I heard that in banking sectors it's more of like you trying to make like financial decisions where like some of the decisions can lead to loss or sometimes there are big failures in the system. So I wanted to know like how you learn from that and like kick forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So I told the team earlier, when I was a child, there were 3 things I wanted to be in no order. And they're laughing. I mean, I don't know if you know what a pop star is. Back in the day, we used to watch Top of the Pops. I wanted to be a pop star. That was like my dream. It was my dream. Even though I can't even sing, that was one. Then I grew up one day and still in the childhood stage, I wanted to be a designer. So I used to catch my small younger sisters and their friends when they were going out and then I'll dress them up like real life dolls. That was the second thing. Then the third one was I wanted to bring Max and Spencer to Ghana. Don't ask me why. None of them materialized. But those were the things I wanted to be. As I started I think I was in uni in my sort of second year, then I was actually an intern at Ecobank. Oh yeah, I should have told you that. It's an important part of my story. Yeah. So I'm intern 10 CU. So I was an intern. So at that time, I interned because I wanted to know if I really liked banking, if you know what I mean. So that summer, that's what I did. But then I realized that 1, I liked it, and 2, to your point on how do you get there, I think 1 is showing interest, but an internship is one of the easiest way to even do a trial and learn. No, it doesn't cost you much. It doesn't cost the bank much. And that's available. We give internships all the time. No, we do. It's not like a secret. Again, I said internships. I didn't say full-time jobs. We do all the time, right? So that's a good way to start. So if you want to, I will give you an internship. That's a way to start. And then you get to know whether or not you're even interested. Maybe, some young people say, oh, it's too much. You come in the morning, you leave at night. Maybe it won't be for you. But at least you get to test it and see if you're interested. And if you are, then you can start putting together your CVs, etc., your CV, your cover letters, and look for a role. But ultimately, when you start working, just like all other pyramids, right? Many come, it's got to end somewhere, you see. So your good results and CV and cover letter will get you in there. But once you're there, your performance and potential is what will take you up there. You see, so it's doable. When you lead a team, even if you didn't create it, you've got to own it. The same way, if the story was good, guess whose picture will be on the thing? Is you. Yes, so you have to remember the good, the bad, the ugly. You are the face of the institution. So you have to own it and then find a solution to it. And then there's the element of accountability. Then you go back to check, why did we get here? Is it because somebody didn't do their job well? Or is it circumstances beyond, what we could have possibly envisaged? The two are not the same, So then you met out the right, I'll keep the word in my head for now. That you should to the people. But end of the day, I think the leader must own up. When it's good, it's you. When it's bad, unfortunately, it's you. You can deal with a team internally, but externally, it's you. All the stories that I've shared, and I've shared a number both here and previously, none of them was directly me, but it's you. It's me. I can't go out and say, it wasn't me, it was Kofi, it was Amma. It wasn't, it was me. And that's why the team that you have is everything. Again, leadership is driving results through people. The better your team, actually, the better the outcomes, the better your own leadership journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abena. A very big round of applause for her.